Welcome to part 2 of the video series on how to graph. And what this video is going to focus on is how to deal with errors in your graphical data, which are called outliers, and how to add in a trend line that's going to do the mathematical application of actually calculating the team batting average for the White Sox. So let's talk about outliers first, and those are found under step 4 in your green note sheet. Now, if we look at this data here, we can see that a lot of this data kind of falls on what we would call a trend, meaning that it's kind of all seen in the same area on the graph in terms of a line. But this little data point does not. So we would call him an outlier because he is very, very far away from where the line would actually be seen if we were to imaginarily draw it in. So an outlier is going to be an area where an extreme error occurred, and then you would need to discuss this data point in your error section because something happened in your lab to make it go so awry. Now we can't just delete it from the graph, we have to include it, but we don't want to include it in the same series as these other points. So what we do is we need to remove it. So if you follow along, what you want to do is you want to put your cursor over it just like I have, because it's going to tell you the data point that you're looking at. This data point is 250, 5, which means we've got an at-bat number of 250 and a hit number of 5. And we can see that that means it's this little data point right here. So what we want to do is we want to remove that from our data. So what I like to do once I identify an outlier is I like to right-click, I like to cut that data, and I like to paste it someplace else. And then I like to put the word outlier above it because that reminds me that this is the outlier. You can see he's still on the graph, so what we need to do is we need to reselect our data so it includes all the points we want, but not the outlier. So just like we did in the first video, we're going to right-click on any data point and we're going to choose Select Data. This time, we're not going to hit Remove. What we're going to hit is the word Edit, because that's going to allow us to manipulate our X and Y axis that we've selected. So our X-axis values, we no longer want to include that 250. We want to include just from 442 to 100. And then we hit that red arrow again, and we can see the data point goes away. So to show you that one more time, you right-click on any data point, choose Select Data, and this time we want to choose Edit. We click on the red arrow for the X-axis values, and we don't include that outlier. We just highlight from the 442 down to the 100. We hit the red arrow again, the data point goes away, but we still need to select the Y-axis data. So we want to include from the 116 to the 25. And then we hit OK, and we can see now that that data point is gone from our graph. But we do need to add this data point in. We do need to include that in our graph, but we want to put it in its own series. So to do that, you right-click, and under the Select Data, we're going to choose the Add option. And what we're going to title this is Outlier. If you had multiple, you'd call it Outliers. And then we're going to select the X and Y axis the exact same way we did in the first video. So our X axis is going to be the number of at-bats. So we're going to select the 250. And the Y axis is going to be our number of hits. So that's going to be the 5. And you can see that that data point comes in its own color. What that now tells us, it is a separate data point from the rest of our data, so it's not going to impact whatever line we now add in. So to go ahead and show you how to do that again, I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to do it the exact same way I just showed you. So once you get under this series now, we're going to choose Add. We're going to title it Outlier. We're going to hit the red arrow on the X to choose the X-axis value, which is 250, because that's our number of at-bats. And we're going to do the exact same thing, choosing our Y-axis value, which is going to be our 5. And we're going to hit OK, and we're going to hit OK again, and that's going to show you your outlier. And it's super important that you do this step because it's going to help us now when we do our trend line. So if you want to flip your green sheet over, we're now in step 5, adding a trend line. If you don't omit this outlier, what it's going to do is it's dramatically going to change the slope of your trend line, which is going to be a huge issue. Because remember, again, we're using slope to calculate the team batting average. Because slope means our rise over our run, we've set up our graph so our hits are over our at-bats. So whatever the slope of our line ends up being is going to give us our number of our batting average. So how you add in a trend line is it's just like how we were editing our data. You're going to right-click on any data point, But this time you're going to come to the bottom where it says add trend line. You're going to click on that word, and we're going to choose a linear trend line. Almost all the graphs we're going to do in this class are going to have linear trend lines. So we want to make sure that that's checked. And what we want to do is we want to come down here and we want to click these bottom two boxes. We want to display the equation on the chart so we can actually see the equation that we have so we can get the slope. And then we want to display this thing called the R-square. And I'm going to talk about him in just a second. And then we're going to hit close. And what you're going to see is you're going to see your line up here and you're going to see your equation, which I like to go ahead and I like to pull out to the side because that's going to allow us to see those numbers a little bit better. So we now have our trend line that's going to give us the slope of the line in our R-square. Now what does this tell us? Using a trend line is much better than just simply calculating an average. Because what a trend line is going to do is it's going to try and fit the data as best possible. So it's going to give you a better trend for your data as opposed to just simply calculating all these averages and then, dividing by your total to getting a quote unquote average. So a trend line tries to fit all the data points that you have as best as possible to give you a better read for your data. This R-square value down here is showing you how close your data is to a linear line. And this is the very last frequently asked question. The closer this number is to 1, the better your data is because that means it's following a very linear sequence. The farther this number is from 1, that means the worse your data is because it's varying very much from that linear trend. So you want to really try and shoot for an R-square value that's close to 1. Now, what is this equational line showing me? That's question number 2. This is following the regular formula of y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope, which is going to fall in front of your x, and then b is going to be your y-intercept. So here, since we were using slope to calculate the team batting average, our slope of our line, our slope of our line is going to be 0.3002, which means that is the team batting average, 0.3002. So we can go ahead and we can use this idea to calculate anything. We can calculate density, we can calculate any sort of thing that has a unit on top and a unit on the bottom. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to now use what you've learned in this graph to go ahead and do some homework graphing. And in that homework graphing, what you're going to do is you're going to calculate the density of pre-1982 pennies. I've got the data on your green sheet that you're going to go ahead and graph, and then all you have to do is email me your graph before midnight this evening so I can give you feedback on how your graph is completed. So if you've got time remaining in class, please use whatever time you have left to go ahead and start your graph, and you can finish it up at home. I hope you guys found these videos helpful, and remember, please refer back to these all year as we will be using this graphing technique in almost every single lab. And remember, if you always have questions, you can ask. Good luck, guys.